It's February 14th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. Starting with South Korean swimmer Hwang Sun-woo at the World Championships over in Qatar. Hwang grabbed the gold in the men's 200-meter freestyle at the World Aquatics Champions in Doha on Tuesday. Not only is he just the third South Korean swimmer to win a world title, but also the country's first South Korean swimmer to claim a medal at 3 straight World Championships. The EU's antitrust regulator has conditionally approved Korean Air's acquisition of Asiana Airlines, allowing the two South Korean air carriers to move one step closer to their merger. With approval from 13 countries and regions, the firms are now waiting for their final call from the U.S. Price hikes in the U.S. did slow last month, but by less than expected, with high housing costs responsible for 2/3 of the 3.1% gain. The latest figures suggest inflation is yet to be tamed. South Korean swimmer Hwang Sun-woo won gold in the men's 200-meter freestyle at the World Championships in Qatar. His first-place finish makes him the first South Korean swimmer to win a medal at 3 consecutive World Championships. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
South Korean swimmer Hwang Sun-woo claimed the top podium spot on Tuesday after winning gold in the men's 200-meter freestyle event at the World Championships in Qatar. In the race at the Aspire Dome in Doha, Hwang finished in 1 minute 44.75 seconds, ahead of Danas Rapsis of Lithuania and Luke Hobson of the United States. Hwang had the quickest reaction time off the blocks with 0.62 seconds and was ahead until the 150-meter mark when Hobson took the lead from the South Korean. Hwang, however, took over in the final stretch, passing Hobson in the final seconds to win his first career world title. His latest gold medal finish makes him the first South Korean to win a medal at 3 straight swimming world championships, as he won silver in the 200-meter freestyle 2 years ago and followed that up with a bronze last year. Hwang's medal was South Korea's 4th in Doha, the most the country has won at a single world championship. On Monday, Kim Woo-min won gold at the men's 400-meter freestyle, while South Korea picked up 2 bronze medals in diving. Hwang will now compete in the men's 100-meter freestyle event and the 4x200-meter freestyle relay, with hopes of more medals in Doha. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The merger between Korean and Asiana Airlines has been given conditional approval from the EU. Now, approval from the U.S. is pending. Out of the 14 countries needed to approve Korean Air's acquisition of Asiana Airlines, our Shin Yeon reports.
Korean Air's planned merger with Asiana Airlines got approval from the European Commission on Tuesday local time. The approval comes almost 3 years after Korean Air submitted its proposed acquisition of Asiana to the EU. Now, out of the 14 competition regulators, just one last approval from the United States is needed. However, the EU's approval is conditional due to the Commission's concerns that the merger could harm competition. As a result, Korean Air needs to remedy the EU's concerns in both passenger and cargo services. In passenger flights, Korean Air will enable rival airline T-Way, a low-cost carrier, to start flights between Incheon and Barcelona, Paris, Frankfurt, and Rome. These 4 air routes overlap with Asiana. Also, Korean Air will divest Asiana's global cargo business. The air industry forecasts that the divestment will take place no longer than October this year. The Commission said Korean Air can only implement the merger on Asiana upon full compliance with these remedies. The industry expects that the Commission's in-depth investigation for this approval will mark as a milestone for future mergers involving other airlines. As the approval from the U.S. is still left to be done, Korean Air plans to finalize its merger procedure as soon as possible. If the U.S. approves, Korean Air is expected to rank within the top 15 in the passenger services and within the top 10 in the cargo services globally. Shin Yeon, Arirang News.
The U.S. Consumer Price Index for January rose more than expected as high shelter prices weighed on consumers. According to the U.S. Labor Department on Tuesday, the Consumer Price Index increased 3.1% on-year in January, above the market expectation of 2.9%. On month, inflation fell 0.3 percentage points from December's reading of 3.4%, much slower than expected. Now, shelter prices contributed mainly to the increase, with the index rising 6% on year. South Korea's exports fell nearly 15% on year in the first 10 days of February. This is according to the Korea Customs Service on Tuesday. Now, is this a concerning figure? We turn to Professor Lee So-hyun this morning. Welcome.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. Professor, according to the latest data, the country's exports dropped nearly 15% on year in the first 10 days of this month. Is this a concerning figure, like I mentioned, or not as much?
Actually, accounting for the working days, 2 days fewer than February last year, the daily average exports increased by 12% year-on-year during the first 10 days of February. So the growth rate of export is slightly lower than January figure, which is 18%, but the recovery seems to be sustained.
Now, in the meantime, the semiconductor exports were up more than 40%. This is the first time chip exports rose more than 40% since November back in 2021. Where is this strong demand coming from?
The bounce back of global semiconductor production is largely expected in 2024, and this is mainly because of a rising demand for the high-priced processors designed for the artificial intelligence. Although the chip manufacturing sector is most likely to continue to improve, the speed of the recovery remains in question since the rampant spending by cloud providers can be offset by more cautious demand from consumers and other businesses.
Right. This is a good news considering South Korea is heavily reliant on chip outbound shipments, especially in the new year. What's also notable is that outbound shipments to China dropped over 20% during the same period. Now, considering last month we saw the first on-year increase in 20 months, what's the reason?
I think this is mainly because of weak demand in China as it faces headwinds to growth. Despite policy stimulus, China's economic growth will remain sluggish, reflecting depressed consumer demand, high debt, and the weak property market.
Then, do you think that will rise next month? What's going to look like next month?
I think it's remain sluggish for some time as we cannot really expect a big, bounce back of the China's economy, I think, yeah.
Right. And the Korea Development Institute is set to release its own economic evaluation and also outlook on the South Korean economy in the coming hours. Last month, the think tank said the Korean economy is showing signs of improvement. What do you expect from this month's report?
Actually, according to the latest updates from the OECD and the IMF, Korea's growth in 2024 is expected to be around 2.2 to 2.3%. And the changes from the last forecast were just minor revisions. And this is, of course, an improvement from last year's growth rate of 1.4%. I think I expect the KDI's economic outlook would not deviate that much from these forecasts.
I'm sure you know a lot more than we do for now. Now, in terms of global economy then, the KDI pointed out that growth is gradually slowing because production and consumption remain sluggish due to high interest rates. Is this still a lingering issue?
Yeah, I think, persistent underlying inflation could prolong tight monetary policy. Putting it another way, central banks may want to avoid premature easing that would lead to a rebound in inflation. This would be particularly an issue for South Korea, I think. And recently, the governor of Bank of Korea pointed out that the bank's pivot to interest rate cuts could potentially be delayed as inflation could reach the target level gradually, but possibly at a slower pace than expected. With the cumulative effects of past monetary tightening, higher for longer interest rates could feed into economic activity, housing market, and credit markets, weighing on economic growth.
All right, let's wait a few more hours until what KDI has to say in its reports in the coming hours. Thank you so much for joining us today, Professor Yi. You have a great day.
Thank you. Have a good day.
South Korea's southern port city of Busan will become a global hub for business and logistics. President Yoon pledged to make that happen. And this is part of the Yoon administration's efforts for balanced regional growth. Our correspondent Oh Soo-young has more.
South Korea will enact a special law to turn the city of Busan into a global business hub as the country looks to narrow regional gaps and spur development across areas outside the capital. That's according to President Yoon on Tuesday during the 11th round of policy discussions with citizens in the southern coastal city. Focusing on balanced regional development, Yoon extended a series of forums focusing on people's livelihoods to areas outside of Seoul and Gyeonggi-do province. Busan was the first stop, the very venue where Yoon last year pledged to usher in a local era, giving regional governments more regulatory freedom to shape policies when it comes to promoting business, creating commercial zones, education and cultural assets. With the aim of turning Busan into the country's second major city, Yoon said Busan would pursue 3 landmark policies to enhance people's livelihoods, boost jobs and economic activities, health and welfare services, with targeted education policies to nurture talent. He said the special law for Busan would aim to foster logistics, finance and high-tech sectors, establishing a new airport on Gadokdo Island by 2029, redeveloping the North Port, and relocating the Korea Development Bank to the city to boost financing, as well as develop a second Centum commercial district to foster startups. Also emphasizing education and cultural development, Yoon pledged to support childcare and education by backing the construction of a children's hospital in Busan, and also the city's major cultural industries such as film and sports. With the so-called Busan model as an example, he said efforts to develop non-capital areas would help overcome their shrinking demographics, as well as the country's chronically low birth rate.
진정한 지방 시대를 열어가기 위해서는 산업과 일자리만으로는 부족합니다. 교육, 의료, 문화를 비롯한 지역의 정주 여건을 확 바꿔서 삶의 질을 확실하게 높여야 합니다.
Earlier in the day, the president called on his secretaries to formulate tax incentives and subsidies for firms that develop policies that encourage employees to have children. South Korea's birth rate is the lowest in the world, currently at 0.78 children per woman, and is expected to further drop to around 0.6 this year. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Tensions grow within the medical community, with doctors resisting the government's plan to raise the med school enrollment quota. The health ministry is keeping an eye on any sort of collective action warned by the medical field. Our Choi Soo-hyung has this report.
Amidst the debate of expanding the medical school quota, trainee doctors are treating the situation with caution instead of immediately resorting to collective action such as a nationwide strike. According to the Korean Intern Residents Association Assembly of Delegates on Monday, the association has agreed to transition into an emergency response committee while withholding further details about action plans. This contentious issue stems from the South Korean government's plan to increase the total enrollment quota from the country's medical schools for the upcoming year by 2,000 per year. Speculation in the medical field suggests this move might be in response to the government's firm stance against collective actions. The Ministry of Health and Welfare currently prohibits collective action by doctors and has warned of the possibility of license revocation if they disobey the Health Ministry's immediate return to work order during a future strike. Furthermore, the ministry has prohibited teaching hospitals from accepting mass resignations from residents. However, some hospitals have indicated that there are still many avenues for collective actions within legal bounds, such as not renewing contracts. Meanwhile, on Tuesday, Park Min-soo, the second Vice Minister of the Health Ministry, mentioned that it is fortunate there have been no collective action thus far, and the government acknowledges the doctors' efforts to save people's lives.
The government will advance its healthcare reform to improve working conditions in hospitals, resulting in a sustainable workplace. We sincerely urge residents to make a decision that stands by the patients.
However, he added that the ministry will continue to monitor the situation, given the absence of a clear stance on future plans by the association. Last Tuesday, the government announced that it would increase the annual medical school quota that has been frozen for 19 years from the current 3,058 to 5,058. Allocations for each individual school will be finalized by next month. South Korea currently has just 2.6 doctors per 1,000 people, far below the OECD average of 3.7. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
Russia and North Korea are bringing each other closer than ever, from apparent arms deals to economic and cultural cooperation. Just last week, 100 Russian tourists visited Pyongyang on a ski trip. Our North Korean Affairs correspondent Kim Jung-sil reports.
North Korea has opened its arms to tourists from Russia. According to a Facebook post by the Russian embassy in Pyongyang, 100 Russian tourists arrived in the North's capital on February 9th. The embassy said this was the first visit after North Korea opened its borders following a 4-year closure due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The tourists included representatives of the tourism industry and media and travelers from all over Russia, from Kaliningrad to Vladivostok. It added the tourists will stay in the north for 4 days and get acquainted with key attractions in Pyongyang while visiting the Masikmyeong ski resort, known as one of the most modern major ski resorts the regime built. The recent hype in Pyongyang-Moscow exchanges hasn't stopped there. On Monday, a delegation of the regime's ruling party officials left Pyongyang to visit Russia. North Korea's official newspaper Rodong Sinmun reported Tuesday that the delegation is on the trip at the invitation of Russia's ruling United Russia Party. The delegation plans to attend an international inter-party forum organized by the Russian party. A senior official at South Korea's Unification Ministry told reporters on Tuesday the government has no comment on ordinary interactions between Pyongyang and Moscow, but added that any illegal interactions such as arms transfers or labor dispatches will need to stop as they violate the UN Security Council resolutions. Moscow and Pyongyang have been strengthening ties ever since North Korean leader Kim Jong-un made a rare overseas trip to meet Russian President Vladimir Putin last September. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Kim Xiang, and now we turn off to stories from around the world. We begin today in the United States, where the Senate on Tuesday passed a $95.34 billion aid package for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. The Democratic-led Senate voted 70 to 29 in favor of the bill, passing the chamber's 60-vote threshold. The votes were cast just before sunrise after a group of conservatives who opposed the bill engaged in a 6-hour-long overnight filibuster. In the end, 22 Republican senators gave their support. The legislation will now move ahead to discover its fate in the House of Representatives, which is controlled by the Republicans. The aid package must be approved by both houses of Congress before President Biden can sign it into law. While President Biden welcomed the approval, Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson has previously criticized the legislation, saying the government is silent on the most pressing issue facing the U.S., referring to security problems at the country's southern border. Now to Indonesia, where voting is set to begin Wednesday for the country's general election. More than 204 million of the country's 270 million people are registered to vote and will be choosing not only their president and vice president, but also parliamentary and local representatives. With President Joko Widodo reaching the end of the maximum of 2 terms allowed, the race for the top position is well underway. Anies Baswedan, Prabowo Subianto, and Ganjar Pranowo are chasing the top job in the world's 3rd largest democracy. Alongside their respective running mates are Muhaimin Iskandar, Gibran Rakabuming and Mahmoud MD. 54-year-old Buzz Whedon and 55-year-old Pranowo are each former governors of Jakarta and Central Java, respectively, whereas the current Defence Minister, Subianto, is a former Special Forces commander. Subianto is running for the third time amid criticism surrounding his running mate, Rakabuming, who is the son of the incumbent president and, despite being under the legal age to run for office, has been given the green light by a constitutional court. In what the Indonesians call its festival of democracy, voting day is a public holiday. If no presidential candidate passes the 50% vote threshold, the top two candidates will compete in a runoff on June 26th. The new president will be sworn in on October 20th. Moving over to India, where police fired tear gas and water cannons at protesting farmers marching in the north of the country on the border of Punjab and Haryana states on Tuesday. Farmers, who form an influential voting bloc in India, are demanding that the government honors a promise made in 2021 regarding the setting of minimum crop prices. Dozens died in a year-long farmers' protest in 2020. Protesters are attempting to march towards Delhi, which authorities have blocked with razor wire, cement blocks and fencing on three sides. This comes as Prime Minister Narendra Modi seeks a third consecutive term in office at this year's general elections. A United Nations report released Monday says nearly half of the world's migratory species are declining in population. According to the first ever State of the World's Migratory Species report prepared by the UN Environment Programme, about 44% of migratory species worldwide and more than a fifth of some 1,200 species monitored by the UN are threatened with extinction. Overexploitation and habitat loss due to human activities are cited as the main reasons. The report added that the biggest concern is the threat to migratory fish, with 97% of known species on the brink of extinction.
Good morning. If you had a winter jacket on this morning, you might have felt too warm. Starting out the day at about 9 degrees in the capital, thanks to the thick cloud coverage that kept yesterday's warmth. Then highs will soar to 16 degrees this afternoon. But with a wintry mix in store tomorrow, lows will go back to below freezing by Friday morning. In fact, the clouds are dropping showers on Jeju and Jeollado provinces this morning. Rain will expand to more southern regions as the day goes on before letting up tonight. Jeju could see 10 to 40 millimeters of rainfall, while the rest of the south could see 5 to 20 millimeters of showers. Afternoon highs in Daegu will be at 18 degrees Celsius, Gwangju, Jeju topping out at 19 degrees this afternoon. Air quality will be normal to good all day today. A mix of rain and snow is in the forecast for tomorrow, starting from the capital and west of Gangwon-do province. Especially mountainous regions in Gangwon-do need to brace for heavy snow of up to 15 centimeters, which will bring a brief wintry chill to the country on Friday. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. We'll be back tomorrow for Thursday's edition at the same time, 9 a.m. Korea time.